It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck, Episode 31, What I've Learned About Fame, with Victoria Libertore.
It's the Acting Income Podcast with Ben Hauck. Turn your passion into income, Ben will show you how. With all the resources that you need to make it as an actor in an expensive city. Stay balanced and make money, you really can't go wrong with actingincome.com.
Welcome to the Acting Income Podcast. I'm Ben Hauck, and on this podcast, we cover topics of interest to actors who want to make money and who want to stay balanced in the pursuit. Thank you so much for downloading this episode. If you're new to the podcast and haven't subscribed yet, pull up iTunes or your podcast's app and click the subscribe button. You'll get weekly episodes right as they come out. This is episode 31, titled What I've Learned About Fame, with Victoria Libertore. The show notes for this episode have all the important links referenced in today's show, which you can pull up right now at actingincome.com/episode 31. And now, here's a word from today's sponsor, my book, Long-Form Improv. Today's guest is Victoria Libertore, who offered praise for my book, Long-Form Improv, the complete guide to creating characters, sustaining scenes, and performing extraordinary heralds. Victoria says on the back cover of the book, Ben Hauck's passion for improvisation is contagious. Improvisational skills are absolutely the most useful tools for any kind of performer, and this book will help you find your game, as well as the capacity to trust yourself in the moment, on stage and off. Victoria was also more or less a guinea pig of some of the improv ideas from the book as a member of my old improv team, so she knows their power. I'd love to hear how the book affects your improv practice. To get a copy of my book, Long-Form Improv, also available in Kindle and Nook, visit actingincome.com/LFI. That's actingincome.com/LFI. I recently saw a solo show at Dixon Place in Soho, a production called My Last Attempt at Fame. It starred Victoria Libertore. I'm no stranger to Victoria's work. In fact, we went to college together, did a memorable Harold Pinter scene in acting class, moved to New York City together, were on the same improv team for years. But Victoria has quite a life outside our friendship. In fact, she's built a reputation of a breathtaking solo performer and a sought-after performance teacher. She's burlesqued and emceed variety shows and racked up acclaim and a following of her original works. Her recent show, My Last Attempt at Fame, was the first I'd seen in quite a while, and it delivered as a Victoria Libertore show does. I don't want to tell you too much about it, in case you get the chance to see it, but I do want to talk about the shocking title of the show, specifically about fame and how it affects the actor and her pursuits. I hadn't known that fame had been a pursuit of Vic's. Maybe it's in nearly all of our actor drives, and I just hadn't thought about it as much as Vic did for her show. But I thought Vic had to have some keen observations about fame, having done the show and having lived in New York City for as long as she has as an actor. I wanted to see what advice and insights she might have, so you can figure out whether you should consider or reconsider your own pursuit of fame, and maybe why you pursue fame. Is your fame for the sake of fame, or for some other endeavor? This interview is a little different than ones I've done before. Maybe you won't perceive the difference, but it's a little slower, more contemplative, and there's a lot to consider. You might want to listen more than one time to this episode. Here's Vic's bio. Victoria Libertore is an actress, writer, curator, MC, and teacher. She's the creator of 7 solo shows, including her most recent show, This Is My Last Attempt at Fame. In her work, she's collaborated with numerous directors and performed her original work throughout New York City, as well as Boston, Montreal, Philadelphia, Provincetown, Toronto, and Washington, D.C. Victoria is taught at Otterbein University and Hastings College and teaches performance workshops incorporating her original archetypal energy technique. Victoria is passionate about encouraging other artists to create their own work and has curated dozens of local and a few international artists with backgrounds in performance, variety arts, music, comedy, and dance. From 2008 to 2010, Victoria was a Brooklyn Arts Exchange theater artist in residence, and she has a BFA in theater from Otterbein University, where in September 2015, she received a Young Alumni Award for Creative Achievement. You can read Victoria's complete bio in the show notes, where you can also find links mentioned in this interview. Just pull up actingincome.com/episode 31. And now, here's my interview with Victoria Libertore. Victoria Libertore, welcome to the Acting Income Podcast.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to be here.
You know, this interview is coming off of seeing a show that you did. I guess you call it a one-person show or a one-woman show that you did at a place called Dixon Place in Manhattan. And the title of that show was...
This is my last attempt at fame.
This is my last attempt at fame. As an audience member, I took it in as a sort of rumination on fame and your relationship with it as an actor who's lived in the New York City area for close to 20 years, I take it.
Yeah, that's true. 1997, over 18 years.
We moved to New York City together in 1997.
We did, September 6th.
What do you remember from that day?
I remember excitement. I remember I was driving the U-Haul truck and I gently hit something. I think that was before I picked you up, actually, as I was leaving the storage unit.
And then we drove overnight, I think, to New York City.
Yeah, I feel like we got here as the sun was coming up. Now, I could be reimagining that for cinematic value, but that's how I recall it.
I recall that too. Now, my question is, especially in light of the project that you just did, This Is My Last Attempt at Fame, why were you coming to New York City?
You know, it was a very visceral decision that I just knew I had to get out of Ohio, and New York was the place to go at that point for actors. You know, in light of our subject, I think I was definitely coming for fame.
What was fame to you back then, from what you recall?
I think fame to me back then was a really, really high level of recognition. So I wanted to have a Tony, perhaps an Oscar and an Emmy, to be on Broadway, to be taking New York City by storm.
And why do you think you wanted fame so much at that time? Do you remember?
You know, at that time, I don't know why I wanted so much. I mean, now looking back, I think I wanted it because I felt it would give me a level of validation, or on an even deeper level that I would matter if I had that kind of fame. At the time, I wanted it because, I don't know, it was like something deep, deep in my heart that wanted it on this very visceral level.
And it sounds as if to me from what you're saying that fame was tied to acting for you. It wasn't necessarily that it was Victoria Libertore, the famous person, but Victoria Libertore, the famous actor.
Yeah, that's very true. I definitely came here with the intention of being a famous actress, wanting to be acting and recognized for that.
So what else came with fame? I saw your show, and I think there were some senses of what fame would bring to your life. Besides the awards, what other things would fame bring to your life from what you were thinking back then?
I think I felt that fame would allow me to live a very lavish lifestyle. So I definitely associate it with money, with working regularly, with people liking me, travel, wonderful clothing, kind of like an overall fabulousness.
Would you say that there was a certain story about yourself that you wanted to tell to other people?
I'm sure there was. I mean, I've always been fascinated with glamour and old Hollywood and movie stars. And so I think at that point at 21, I wanted all of that. You know, I don't even know if that exists anymore with the age we live in, but this idea of this old Hollywood glamour and people finding me interesting and admiring my talent. And, you know, I joke about in the show, I want to be seen, recognized, honored, revered, awarded, rewarded, and loved for every move I make. So now I can look at it and kind of laugh about it. But back then, and maybe up to a year ago, it was like this desperate need within me.
Wow, that's fascinating to hear, because I think back to our time at college and I think about you as a person. The old Hollywood influence seems evident on, I almost want to say, your personality. It seems as if that's been a big influence. So it makes me wonder, how much do you think the interest in fame has written your personality? Do you feel that it has at all? Do you feel like it's something separate from that?
That's a great question. So how much has the interest in fame written my personality? I don't even know how to answer it. So maybe it's such a part of my personality that I don't have enough outside perspective to say. I mean, do you feel like it's part of my personality?
Let me ask you a similar question. If you didn't have the pursuit of fame so much in your life, What kinds of choices do you think you would make differently than the kinds of choices you've been making that do align with fame?
Well, this kind of goes to what your interest is about. I think the choices I would make is probably more regular income and maybe more structure in my life. And that's sort of what the show came out of. I turned 40 2 weeks ago. And so pursuing fame at 40 and not being famous is very different than 21 and not being famous. And so this timeline of my own life is impacting my pursuit of fame.
That's especially why I want to share your perspectives on fame, because I'm imagining in the Acting Income podcast audience, there are actors who've just moved to the big city to pursue their acting careers, perhaps with fame in their eyes. And there are 20-something actors who've maybe been in the city for a while and pursuing things. Or maybe there's even a 60-something actor who's just starting an acting career with fame in his or her eyes. So you've been going at it for a while, and I wanted to hear what kind of perspectives you can offer on that very topic. Now, in light of that, I know in moving to the city, you weren't solely focused on fame, so I don't want to make that kind of confusion. We're just focusing a little bit on that fame aspect. What kind of steps did you make as an actor when you moved to the city, when you moved to New York City, that was an expression of that pursuit of fame?
Well, I have to say, upon reflection, I've had a very passive pursuit of fame. I pretty quickly fell into making my own performance work, my own solo shows, or working with ensembles. After I had an internship out of college at a casting director's, that led to working at a talent agent. And it so happened to be this boutique talent agency with lots of people that were downtown performers. So I really, in my life, have not gone on many auditions, and I've not done that traditional actor path. Never say never. Maybe I'll do it now that my outside is starting to match up with my insides as far as the age I feel. But I very quickly started to pursue my own work. So you're right. As much as I say I came here for fame, it was really this need to express myself and create. And I think I kind of hoped I'd get famous as a byproduct of that.
Well, it's kind of interesting that if you're doing solo shows, you become essentially the star of the show.
That is true. You do become the star of the show.
How much was being around the clientele of this boutique talent agency an influence on those desires to be a star? Did you also want to be a star as a result of being around them?
I guess the word star wasn't there so much for me, more like a really admired artist, I think. You know, I saw some of those clients have New York Times reviews and be traveling the country performing their work, and it was this feeling of like, oh, I want that, you know, or being featured in a magazine for the work they're doing. That's where fame sort of landed for me.
Ah, I see. So maybe the inklings of it were when you were moving to the city, but you started to get tastes of it and you started to want more of what you were tasting.
I think so. I think pretty early on my idea of fame started to shift a bit in the sense of, oh, I don't have to be a famous actress in the traditional sense to be satisfied. Maybe I can be famous for making my own performance work.
And that's exactly how I see you, Victoria. In the time that you've been in the city, you have evolved as a solo performer, and you've attracted quite an audience to your solo performances, I noticed over time. You became quite notable in your circles, and I'm not sure if you would use those terms, but I would use those terms. You started to attract people to your performances. I didn't see other performers succeeding on that level as much as you did. So I guess I want to ask, did you see yourself as starting to gain a little bit of notability, a little bit of fame in smaller circles as your performing career took off?
Yes, I did, actually. That brings me up to more recent times. 2.5 years ago, I put up a show and I worked with a director that is famous in her own right. And I really had this feeling of, oh, now I've arrived, you know, and I think I lost a little bit sight of the work. Even though I put a lot into the work, I also unconsciously was putting a lot into now this is my break. And then I put up that show and I felt great about it. But afterwards, there was this sort of deflating period where it did not take me, in quotes, to the next level, in quotes, that I thought I'd be taken to. And so that's been a humbling period of where this new show's come out of.
Oh, that's interesting. Sometimes I've heard of, say, people who move to the city. I want to be a Broadway actor or I want to be a Broadway dancer. And their dreams are realized immediately upon arriving. And then they're lost after that point because they don't know what next to pursue. I'm not sure if you're actually saying that. It sounds like you're saying something slightly different, as if you had expectations of what would come as a result of this performance.
Yes, I had expectations that that performance that I did because of the person I was working with and having a 3-week run, that I'd get a great review and it would lead to less fame and more like, oh, now I can be a consistently working artist and earn my income solely as an artist. And what I keep learning again and again and again, Ben, is that I need to continue to be my own advocate. I think all these years of doing work, I've sort of waited for somebody to say, you're a star, let's give you a TV show or something, and I realized that in however many little ways or big ways, I need to keep kind of putting myself and my work out there. The same way actors need to keep going to auditions, I need to keep initiating interactions with others to be successful.
So was that a recent lesson in your career?
Unfortunately, yes. It's taken this long to truly realize that.
Well, that surprises me because you've done, I don't even know how many solo shows in your time in New York City. It seems like you've advocated for your career and you've put yourself out there numerous times.
Thank you. I have, yes. I mean, I haven't been doing nothing at all, but I'm just seeing all the ways to really sustain myself that actually even doing more is required.
So you talked of this particular show that you did 2 years ago. What was the title of it, by the way?
That was called No Need for Seduction.
So you did No Need for Seduction. Was that a pivotal time when your relationship with fame was starting to change?
I think it changed as a result of the show. So when I was making the show, I think I probably was still very much in my pursuit of fame as sort of a sideline of making my own work. And especially the person I worked with as a director was Lee Fondakowski, who was one of the creators of the Laramie Project. She was amazing to work with. And I also realize now that part of me thought, oh, working with her and somebody at this caliber will give me the credential to be, I don't know, famous or whatever, whatever that is at that point. And then again, like after doing the show, when nothing solid came out of that production, as far as the next production, I had to start to reevaluate my relationship to fame and what is it to make it, in quotes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what it felt like after that point? Were you gut-wrenched? Were you disillusioned? What was your mental state after that?
I think I went into a sort of foggy depression, to be honest. When I go to that place, I can get pretty passive.
Do you mean not work as much?
Yes, I mean not work as much. The great thing that came out of that is I kind of feel like a rock in a stream that's being smoothed out. So as a person and as an artist, the great thing that came out of it is realizing that I have value regardless of having a Times review, regardless of how much money's in my wallet or my bank account, regardless of somebody saying, you're a great artist, that I have value as an artist and a human because I exist. And I have this deep desire to share myself and connect in this way of live theater to an audience. And all that led to this new show, which I think of all the work I've done, and this is my 7th solo show, it's the one that I'm the most proud of.
It's interesting what you say. There's an earlier episode of this podcast, episode 17. And in that episode, Jen Lederer, my guest, talks about how not to tie one's self-worth to one's bank account, to have value for oneself independent of whatever's in one's bank account. Would you say that you've come out of that depression? We're 2 years after that point. If you did, how did you get out of that?
I came out of it by focusing on gratitude. It always helps me to go to the immediate of, look at this beautiful life I have and a lovely home, and I live in New York City, and I have a partner of 7 years, and we travel, and I have great friends and community. And sometimes, Ben, it's like really simple of like, I have a toilet. There are people in the world that don't have a toilet or running water. I have food in the refrigerator. And so it starts with gratitude, and then connecting with other artists really helps me. Talking to other artists that make their own work and how do they deal with moving on to a next project or keeping their work going and sharing themselves.
In some way, I would think that just simply distracts you away from the issues you had, the dashed expectations. But perhaps those connections with other artists help give you new direction?
I think so. I think anytime one connects with another, knows they're not alone in whatever they're going through, definitely gives new direction and new perspective. I think gratitude is an action. What eventually came out of it for me was a new creative project. And often my solo shows have come out of a place of pain. When I did my Journey of Decay about all my dental work, it came out of a place of, oh my God, I'm the only person in the world going through this. And then I learned actually many people have gone through it.
For anyone who doesn't know, Victoria's had extensive dental work and she turned it into a solo show that was quite entertaining.
Thank you.
This is a perfect segue to your current project. This is My Last Attempt at Fame. What were you ruminating about? What was on your mind that inspired this whole project? There were a lot of different topics and themes, I would say, covered in that. What were some of the ones you were actively considering when you were creating the show?
Well, I say it's a show about art, aging, and animals and the balance of life. So when one is aging, for example, me, craving more comfort in my life and more domesticity, and is that at battle with my creative drive? And to come back to the topic of money, once again, at this age, being in the arts is different than it was at 21 for me. So I was ruminating about when I made the show, how does all this balance out and how do I keep doing this and how do I sustain myself and make work? So right now it's been less about fame and more about sustaining myself as an artist. And really the question of, am I going to give up, in quotes? Hence the title, This Is My Last Attempt at Fame.
How do you answer that question right now, today, as we're doing this interview?
You know, right now, today, to be honest, I'm in a little bit of post-show depression.
You only ended it, what was it, last week?
Yeah, a week ago.
We're recording this on October 15th.
Yes. If I had this podcast with you the day after the show, I think probably my tone would be different because I was on such a high and the adrenaline from doing the show and the interaction with the audience and getting feedback in a way of so many people relating. I mean, the really basic theme of the show is thinking your life would look one way and it looks another. And that seems to be universal regardless if you're an actor, artist, or not. You know, we all have this idea of how our life's going to look, and it seems like for 99.9% of us, maybe 100%, it looks different than we anticipated. So, in all the beauty of that and the horribleness of that, it's a universal story. So to answer your question, what's it look like today? Am I going to give up? No, I'm not going to give up. I still want to be a working artist and sharing my work. And I also see that I can be more active in the pursuit of that.
Moving back a little bit, in your evolution as an actor, you became more and more notable. And from what I understand, people started to want to work with you and learn how to do solo work. And you also had I guess you could say, a side gig as a burlesque artist. And people wanted to do what you did and become a burlesque performer. You eventually found yourself as an artist in residence and as a teacher to other performers. I'm curious if you passed on any lessons about fame or saw the stars in some students' eyes. You were also a curator of variety shows, and you brought together performers to be able to get the spotlight. So I'm curious what perspectives you might have either gained on performers who are interested in fame or what you might have taught them about it.
Well, I just want to say that my curating, to back up a little bit, really came out of a place of me being very jealous of other artists' success. So I would feel just very, very jealous and kind of torn up that so-and-so is having success. I knew it was such an unhealthy and futile feeling that I was like, I have to counter this. And so that's where curating came from, you know, of like, let me totally go the opposite direction and give others an opportunity to perform. And then it turned out that I loved curating shows and I loved helping artists. And so it was really healing for me. And I say that I don't have a lot of jealousy these days as far as comparing myself to other artists.
So becoming a curator healed the jealousy you were having? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yeah, it did. Not that every now and again I don't have some jealousy or envy. I'm human, but I don't feel torn up about it in the way that I used to. I'd say when I teach in regards to fame, I have more taught when I'm working with solo performers, either doing performance work or burlesque, about the relationship with the audience. And if you come into a piece and you want approval from the audience and you want them to like you and think you're great, I think that's a painful place to perform from when you're by yourself on stage, because being on stage by yourself as opposed to a cast of people is very different. So what I've said to people is think of what you're bringing to the stage as a little gift. And I work a lot with archetypes, and so the archetype of the servant and the highest sense of I have a little gift to give you, and that's this performance that I'm sharing with you. And I find when I do that, and when I've watched my students do that, I really see heart opening and connecting as opposed to that search for fame or approval.
Just help me understand more clearly, or help the audience understand more clearly what it means to work with archetypes.
I started work with archetypes after studying Balinese mask, and I started to see using archetypes like the servant, the healer, the seducer, the queen, the goddess, the clown can be a very useful way to perform your work and how you meet an audience.
Moving back to the topic of this is my last attempt at fame, one theme that I saw explored in there over and over was social media. You talk about social media and our interactions with social media. And granted, other artists have definitely touched on that in their own projects. And it's been a topic, just even in social psychology, our relationship with social media. But what touched me about your presentation was that as a performance artist, the relationship people have with social media seemed to mean that people wouldn't see your shows as much or wouldn't watch your shows with as much depth. So what I took away from your show was that social media, in a way, was making people focus more on, say, their media than on your performance, that it was almost a rival for your performance. I'm not sure if that was an intentional message that you were portraying, but it was something that I got as an audience member. And it made me kind of sad because your work is at such a high quality and with such depth. I'm curious what your perspectives are on social media. I know when I think of social media, it's almost as if everyone wants to be famous and they want to be famous in social media. What are your thoughts on social media, especially with respect to fame?
My thoughts are that everybody is sort of making a solo show now out of their lives through social media. And when I started to do this work 18, 19 years ago, it was to connect with people so we would know that we're not alone with their stuff. And now I feel like we're not alone enough with ourselves. And I do think that that search for fame through social media has increased because there is increased exposure that can happen if you have a computer or a phone and an internet connection. So the idea of fame for the sense of fame, I feel like more people are growing up with than they used to. And then as far as my own work, I did not intentionally mean to put out there that social media is taking away from live performance, but it probably is. For me, it was more the question of, again, seeking a type of fame through approval, like how many likes do I get for a photo, and being disappointed. And this is the other thing about fame that I think is an important point. It's never enough. You know, like I've had friends that have had New York Times reviews for their work, and they've said to me, I still want more. You know, I want to be on the cover of the art section. So I think that's the thing about fame, is that it's like this drug that you'll never, ever, ever get enough of, no matter what amount of it you have. And so it's sort of futile to pursue.
It's interesting. It makes me think that fame for the sake of fame, that's somewhat of a problem, but fame for the sake of some other endeavor, maybe that would be helpful. For example, maybe if the pursuit of fame was that so you could get a certain message out, maybe there's some nobility in that. Once the message is out, then you can celebrate having the fame. Was your fame a vehicle towards some other goal? Or did you think that in some respects your fame was just to be famous?
I think I wanted fame, now looking back, simply for love or approval or being liked. I think it came from low self-esteem. Now I think any desire for fame I have is like, oh, I'd love to be a working artist, and that would be easier to do if I had a little more fame.
I love that. And yes, you did touch on earlier about the kind of self-esteem aspects of the desire for fame.
What you're saying about the idea of fame for a deeper message, I think as I am aging, that is more important to me. And another through line in my show was animals, and I've fallen in love with animals. And I talk about in the show Life Beyond Your Wildest Dreams. I thought it would be a Tony, an Oscar, an Emmy, and actually for me it's Sleeping with a Pit Bull. And I've fallen so in love with dogs and cats, and I've become vegetarian and probably on my way to veganism. And so to get that message across in an artistic way that doesn't bang people over the head, and I've had people since the show say that they're thinking about maybe not eating meat anymore after seeing the show. And I feel like I put the message out in a pretty gentle, loving, non-judgmental way. So yes, Fame to put a message out like that, or Fame to encourage people to keep making work, Fame to help in some way is definitely still appealing to me.
In that respect, should actors pursue fame? Should they not pursue fame?
Now at this age of 40, my thought is to focus on your work and how you can contribute. And if fame comes, great. If not, great.
You would give that advice not just to an actor of your age, but an actor who's just starting out or an actor who's in their 20s?
Yeah, I would give that advice to everybody. Just focus on the work. I heard a casting agent that's pretty famous say the mistake he sees actors make when they come in a room to audition is they're focused on everything but the work. It's really just focus on the work, and it's such a simple message, and I'm still learning it.
It's so hard. I mean, I'm an actor too. There's so much to do and so much you're told to focus on. It does seem to distract away from just doing the work, but you also have to market yourself, and that maybe even connect with fame too, in the sense of you want to make sure you're known and people know about you. So you network and you try to get out there, and you have to do this, that, and the other. And it just, all this stuff that you're told that you're supposed to be doing keeps you out of, say, in a class or just working on a scene with another actor, or working on a monologue by yourself and developing the skills so that when you take a job, you can do the job easily. You just hit a nerve there, Victoria.
Good. Yeah, it's true. And I think, too, that other stuff is important. Maybe it's knowing that you're doing it because you want to be doing the work. So when I work on my website, or I go to a networking event, or I reach out to somebody and ask them to come see my show, all of it is in support of wanting to be a working actor, actress, artist.
Victoria Libertore, is there anything else you want to share with the Acting Income Podcast audience?
Yes, I'd love to share about an experience I had that really changed my relationship to fame. Just this past year, I was in Nebraska performing, and I got brought out to Hastings College to teach and work with students creating their own work, and then I performed This Is My Last Attempt at Fame. And in the audience were some farmers, and I had such a great time being in Nebraska performing, and I was like, even if I never step on Broadway, just this act of a stage and an audience and me sharing my work is what I want. And so it really hit me that it's not fame, it's just the doing it. And one of the farmers got my email and tracked me down and told me how much the show meant to him. And in the show, I'm openly gay, and it's not the focus of the show, but I talk about my relationship. And he basically told me in this email that he's gay and he's lived with his gay farmer boyfriend, and they're in Nebraska, and how much the show meant to them. And I said to my director, Jen Tuttle, that was better than a Tony. Like getting that, that type of what we want to do as artists. We want to impact people and connect with them and make a difference. And I feel like I experienced that in such a deep way that this pursuit or idea of fame shifted once again.
When I see Victoria Libertore perform, I laugh, I cry, I'm aghast, and I'm fascinated. I never know where it's going to go, and I know the journey is going to be incredible. Victoria, I may have just embarrassed you, but I really encourage people to see you perform. I don't know what your next performance is going to be, but if someone wants to learn when you're next performing, where can they go to learn about your next performance?
Go to my website, Howling Vic. That's my old burlesque name that I still am going by on my website, howlingvic.com.
Howlingvic.com. Victoria Libertore, thank you so much for talking to the Acting Income Podcast.
Thank you, Ben. It's been great. And I'll say what I said in my show, my little haiku. Once you dreamed of fame, then life settled in on you. This is much better.
Right after our interview, Vic wanted to add one more thing. Maybe she just wanted to press this point. It's that she's developed over the time she's pursued fame the question, the desire, the interest in how she can be of service with her work. As she put it, it's, quote, just this desire to be of service with my work and wherever that takes me, regardless of the fame aspect. So where are you now with fame? If you're on a quest to be king or queen of social media, to get likes or follows in the hope that's going to mean more fame or maybe more acting income, are you going to look back and ask yourself, what was the point? Will your quest for fame be a waste of time and energy? Did it serve another interest? A higher interest? The same with your acting. Are you a worker serving a production, hoping to get more work? Or do you just want to be famous? Or do you want something else? Getting to know your answers to that question may help you understand your drives and prepare you for the road ahead. Thanks again to Victoria Libertore. You can find information on her future performances at howlingvic.com. And that's the show. This episode was sponsored by Longform Improv, the complete guide to creating characters, sustaining scenes, and performing extraordinary heralds by Ben Hauck. To get a copy of Longform Improv, also available on Kindle and Nook, visit actingincome.com/LFI. The show notes for this episode are available at actingincome.com/episode31, where you can also leave a comment on this episode. You can also find Acting Income on Twitter and Facebook. If you have a story idea, visit actingincome.com/pitch. If you'd like to advertise on the show, visit actingincome.com/advertise. And if you love the content of this podcast, please tell other actors with a review of this podcast on iTunes at actingincome.com/iTunes. I'm Ben Hauck. Now I'm famous. And for more information, as always, check out actingincome.com.